welcome everyone to this episode of the Talent Fix. I'm delighted to be joined today by Steven Talbot. Steven is co-founder and CEO of Nebula. Welcome to the episode, Steven. And if you want to kick us off just by giving us a very quick summary of kind of your background and a quick overview of what Nebula does.
Yeah, lovely. Thank you. My background. So I've spent 20 years, 2 decades this year, in staffing. And I founded a recruitment agency in the UK in 2009, brought it to the US in 2012. I've been here ever since. And then I co-founded Nebula a few years ago. It was initially a partnership between the recruiting agency GQR and a group of data scientists that came out of JP Morgan and built some compelling sorting algorithms. We built a prototype inside of a recruitment business, which was called Ava, the precursor to Nebula. And then Nebula is now an operating system for recruiting agencies and recruiting functions. So it brings AI, specifically predictive and agentic intelligence into the recruiting process from soup to nuts, as we'd say in the US. That might mean something different in the UK and Europe. But
I know what you mean.
It supports the entire recruiting process from sourcing through to placement, through to redistribution, drives recruiter collaboration, customer collaboration, and stitches together a series of fragmented workflows into one AI-enabled workflow that sits on top of and integrates into current systems, existing ATSs, CRMs, ERPs, and drives action rather than just recording activity.
Yeah. Okay, so it's an ATS that does stuff, saves recruiters time, and I think you had some really impressive. You've seen some really impressive results in terms of the efficiencies it can drive.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I think that is a good analogy. It is an ATS that does stuff. That's a better version, and it's the doing stuff, and how it can do stuff for recruiters, with recruiters, and empowering all of your people within the business. Is the power. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, great stuff. Okay, well, listen, let's dive into the questions. We're going to be kind of short and sharp here, but if we can cover, kind of love to get your thoughts in terms of kind of what you're seeing across recruitment, staffing, and talent teams, and with a particular angle on kind of how AI is improving recruiting performance.
Yeah, no, good. I think that's a great question because AI has been through the cycle. It's been a dirty word, and even 5 years ago when Nebula was nascent, we avoided the AI domain, knowing that it was already saturated 5 years ago, and particularly in recruiting, we've had this hype cycle and this narrative of AI displacing humans, individual recruiters, agencies, to marketplaces, and all these sorts of things. It's coming through the cycle. It's starting to be proven what we in the industry knew all along, is that you can't expect to take a good recruiter out of a process and expect the same high quality results. You can't. What we do is a complex series of tasks that look simple on the surface, but the knowledge, intelligence, relationships, and trust embedded within this already complex transaction, it can't be automated yet. I think the average recruiter is now automatable, but the truth is the average recruiter doesn't get it done. And what the best recruiters do is very difficult to displace with AI.
So what is that then? What do the best recruiters do, and where do you think the sort of the human recruiters are still more effective?
Yeah, fundamentally, relationships is the most important thing, and what you get out of relationships is on the customer side. Most importantly, it converts what would be a transaction into an ongoing partnership. And that is the moat that I think a lot of the would-be, AI and tech displacers have failed at. They don't appreciate the customer relationship, and they thought that if they got critical mass on the candidate side, that they would drag the customer around the demand and supply dynamic with them. Just not true in reality. And also,
okay, so do you
yeah,
think then when you talk about what separates a good recruiter or an average recruiter from a great recruiter, you mean,
yeah,
Steve, that relationship building piece?
absolutely. I think
Yeah,
both on the demand
yeah, I
side with the
agree.
customer and then the trust with the candidate. Um,
Yeah,
that there is a real difference between knowledge, human knowledge and machine intelligence. And
yeah,
whilst with, natural language processing, um, a machine can understand the context of a resume extremely
mhm,
well. It's what we call extrinsic accuracy.
yeah,
It doesn't yet, and is a long way away from intrinsic accuracy, understanding the human behind the resume,
mhm,
what their aspirations are, what their motivations are, and particularly in a candidate-driven market where most candidates are passive at best and rarely
mhm,
active. It's a very short window where a candidate is actively job seeking, and the majority are passive. And so, understanding what someone wants as a buyer of talent, your customer, what they really want, what they really need within their team, and what a job seeker really wants in their career, their next job, that their employer, that is what is necessary to actually drive, high quality placements.
brilliant. Okay, so then if we move on to kind of recruiter productivity,
Yeah,
um, where specifically do you think AI helps with the sourcing, screening, and engagement?
yeah.
Yeah, and kind of talk to me a bit about kind of the human and the agent working together and how you see that working most effectively.
Yeah, totally. Um, so the first part of the question was
I think if we
productivity.
talk, yeah, I mean, how does AI maybe take the repetitive work off recruiters?
Yeah, yeah. I think most of the leakage of recruiter effort is at the top of the funnel, where people spend a lot of time, interacting with an enormous list of prospects, and a lot of that is the effective market mapping, trying to figure out who's where and what they're doing, and then
So
the
do you mean
next,
that they spend an
yeah,
awful lot of time chasing irrelevant candidates? Is that what you mean?
I I think finding them first, like that's the
Okay.
first step. So that's,
Yeah.
20 years ago, we would have called that market mapping.
Yeah.
Um, and now, an actual talent graph, where the context of what someone is doing is captured. Now that's now available. So your market mapping's done. If Nebula's got the US labor market mapped, you don't need to go and write lists and map them. The next step is
Okay.
to
So let's say
understand
I'm
what
looking
people really
for
do.
a
Yeah,
software engineer in Nevada.
yeah,
Nebula has those candidates mapped effectively. Is that what you're saying?
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I mean,
Okay.
there are two things, right? So the knowing the location, um, that's structured data. We
Hmm.
can search for Nevada as a word,
Yeah.
or we can map their zip codes and create all kind of different inferences based on where the location is.
Yeah.
That's a relatively easy problem to solve. The more
Yeah.
difficult problem there is what is a software engineer, because you can find the same 10 keywords, in a Boolean search string for a software engineer versus a forward deployed engineer versus a quant within a hedge fund.
Hmm.
And because they use the same techniques and tools,
Hmm.
that accuracy is very difficult to capture in keywords. And the big breakthrough in AI, which is near a decade in progress with transformer architecture coming around in 2016, is that natural language processing works, and we can get real natural language understanding. So I can copy and paste a job description or a resume or the profile of a candidate that I like, or I can invent one, my perfect
Hmm.
candidate. And then I can enter that as a search query, a comprehensive search query, and AI can then stack rank the entire US labor market for relevance, against that archetype. So that's a search prompt. And just like we're now familiar with all of our chatbots, you can have a natural language search prompt, a copy of a resume, rather than a set of keywords and filters, and get a much more accurate representation of accuracy that someone is actually doing what you're looking for.
Okay. Very interesting. And then, yeah, I think your view is that kind of the best model, and I share this view, is that it's not about AI, instead of people. It's AI and humans working together. So the AI agent and the human recruiter, either as a manager of agents or an orchestrator of agents. How do you see that structure evolving, or what's the best setup for that team?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that there are two, like there's a midpoint and an endpoint in those two. So I think like the next generation of recruiting firms that want to scale are going to need some form of tech enablement. And that is where either their people's efforts are reduced for the same outcomes, or their outcomes are improved for the same effort, or something in between. I think there are two important things to do. And I think less effort is important. Recruiting used to be sheer brute force, mass outreach, massive volume. And that's not particularly sustainable. The average tenure in recruiting is too short. It needs to be longer. It needs to be easier to ramp up and be successful, and then easier to sustain success. So I think the effort reduction piece is important and often overlooked, because people talk about productivity only. And I think we can have both. I think there can be productivity improvements. The increase in gross profit and revenue per head is important. And then creating a sustainable career for your people is also important. So I think tech enablement is important for scalable, sustainable businesses. And then I think in the long run, what could be the next iteration on that is human-enabled tech, where the technology can do the entire process on autopilot, but it's best not to. It's best to have effectively a human manager with a bunch of co-pilots that could be autopilots working on their behalf, doing a lot of the heavy lifting, including the intelligent stuff, not just the automation, but intelligence too.
Yeah, so the managing separate workflows, right? So that could be interview scheduling, could be reference checking, could be interview companion screening, etc. Yeah,
completely. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, very interesting, and I think that is absolutely the way forward. But it does lead to the obvious question that, like, if we are automating these workflows, what is the recruiter? I mean, we've identified relationship building, but what is going to be the day-to-day duty of a typical recruiter in 5 years' time, in your opinion?
I think it's bringing relationships into transactions. And what we get out of that relationship is more knowledge, more mutual understanding, which is important on both sides of our market. Relationships will always matter. As technology evolves, switching costs evaporate. Job applicants apply to typically 5 to 10 jobs, so they're going to end up in 5 to 10 agencies' inboxes. And who they come back to is going to be who they trust and who they have a relationship, and even more so, on the client side too. I think the best people, be they hiring managers or job seeker candidates, are going to require human activation. I think that's true now. I think it's going to be even more true in the future. With the saturation of bots and agentic outreach, people are just going to go blind, and we're going to get back to where we are in like the dating apps now.
Yeah. I heard someone else use that analogy. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
Just oversaturation and false promises and low quality. So that trust matters. The activation of relationships is going to come through people. The retention of relationships is determined by people. There's a real fundamental difference between intelligence of an AI and knowledge of a person, all of the years of intuition that we have and the understanding of other people. And what I think a lot of the tech first Silicon Valley software companies get wrong is there's so much insider information and proprietary knowledge and data that is created through these relationships. There's a much deeper understanding, and there's an opportunity to encode that in your database so that you have a better understanding of what each person's preferences are rather than just what they're qualified for.
So making it highly personalized.
Yeah. I mean, AI companies would call that annotation, which is, one of the biggest billion-dollar.
So that's interesting, Stephen. We are a recruitment as a service business. We embed our recruiters with our clients' business. And one thing we're seeing more and more with clients in the US and internationally is candidate fraud. And not only are our clients being inundated with CVs within seconds of posting jobs, the clients are really struggling to find out who is a real candidate and determine what's real, what's fake. What are your views on that? And does Nebula potentially help with that problem?
Clearly, yeah. I mean, there are degrees of candidate fraud. There is the pervasive fake candidates, and then there are, if everyone is using AI to revise each resume for each application, then what is their real experience? So entering the world of my agent versus your agent, and whichever can trick you that I've got the experience all the way through to the the fake video job interview. So it creates like the kind of digital footprint that real people have. It takes a lot to duplicate. And again, it's going to be an arms race because agentic capabilities means that we can do that. But a real profile is traceable over often years in their online profiles, their online activity. So Nebula's core data set aggregates lots of social media websites, lots of online activity. Also aggregates contact information, emails, telephone numbers, and all these sorts of things. And typically there are easy red flags for fake candidates where they don't have this footprint. So they won't have the same quality and depth of online presence. And even for people that aren't particularly active online, you've had a profile and a presence somewhere for a long time. And if that profile appeared yesterday and you applied to a job today and you're claiming that you've got multi-years experience and it looks like you didn't exist in the digital world before, it's a pretty simple flag to capture now. And then the other one is, what are you presenting yourself as in the real world? So your aggregated online digital footprint, your profile, does that look anything like how that person's presented themselves in their application? And so there are degrees of outright candidate fraud and then misrepresentation that can be tracked if you're aggregating all of these data sources.
Sure. Okay, that's great. I think that's kind of a great way to wrap up. I promise you'll be short and sweet, so I want to keep that promise. But I do want to ask you kind of just one final question. Like, what do you think is the biggest problem that employers are facing today when it comes to hiring and talent attraction?
I think it's noise. They're even with relatively low unemployment, there's still sufficient qualified candidates out there. It's just finding them amongst all the noise. And you can go and post all the jobs on all the jobs boards, and the majority of your inbound applicants aren't going to be qualified. And the ones
when you say noise, that's what you're referring to. Just so I'm clear, you're talking about those irrelevant profiles that apply to jobs
all of it, all the way through. So it starts at the very top with 99% of your applicant pool being unqualified. And then now, half of your 1% that is qualified, maybe half of them aren't real people, or they're overly enriched applications. And so I think that's a fundamental problem, the noise without signal. And what that means is that everyone's sent off in the wrong direction, spending time with the wrong people, the wrong profiles, the wrong talent sources. So I think we've got into a world that is so noisy that noise is very expensive, and finding a signal really requires AI now. That's the other side.
So signal versus noise, basically, and
Yeah.
using AI to figure that out.
Yeah.
Well, look, that's a brilliant way to finish. Stephen, where can people contact you if they have any more questions about what we've discussed today or Nebula?
Yeah. Find me on LinkedIn,
Yeah,
send me an email, Steven@nebula.io.
perfect. Okay, listen, look. Well, look,
Yeah.
thanks so much for joining today, Stephen. Been great chatting with you, and thanks to everyone for listening. Check us out on Apple and Spotify.
Okay. Thanks very much. See you soon.